Before the rally, the Forward on Climate rally on the 17th, I consider it a protest, actually, myself. It was not a rally. Chris Williams and I, got in touch, and he said, you want to do this forum. And, we looked at kind of what our agenda was for this protest and discovered that it was exactly the same agenda. And so we said, sure, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this forum. We did the forum, and we found that it was just incredible to see the outpouring and support of people who were not there to go forward with Obama on climate, but were really there to go forward with the 99% for people, peace, and the planet, and really looking to redefine the climate movement as a movement of systemic change that's not only focused on a pipeline, not only focused on our fuel, but really focused on the fundamentals of our democracy, our economy, and on fundamental justice. So it was just really exciting to discover that we had so much in common, not only with each other as political organizations, but actually with the people out in the street. There was an enormous support for what we were talking about out in the street, as opposed to what was on the stage, which was, in my view, too much about praising Obama. It was not about Obama, we've got your back, while he stabs us in the back, but rather about telling the bums, to get with the program or get out of the way. And, I think that's very much where we have to go as a climate movement and as a social movement. And I think the winds of change are very much on our side. And the exciting thing about this conference is that it really kickstarts our efforts to get organized, because we really do have the solutions for the economy, for jobs, for healthcare, for peace under a program of international law and human rights, rather than military might and wars for oil. We really do have the solutions. They're not rocket science. They're plain common sense and justice. And we also have the numbers on our side. We know that from poll after poll, that the people of the U.S. are really ready to go with this agenda. And I'll go more into the details of that as we go along. But just to say that we've really got an incredible historic moment that's happening right now for us, where this spirit of democracy and justice really is breaking out. So while capitalism may be trying to kill the planet, the people are rising up, and we are simply not going to allow it to happen. So as you know, from the democracy revolutions in the Middle East to the Occupy Wall Street protests, the climate and the tar sands blockade, the teachers' strikes, the Walmart workers' walkouts, the student debt fight, the eviction blockades, the efforts to shut down and prevent any new nuclear power plants from opening, especially in the wake of Fukushima, and the fight against fracking, which the people of New York are doing such a good job of doing. More power to you, and let's hope we turn this into a permanent ban on fracking. So keep up your great work, and thank you for fighting the good fight on fracking. You're fighting it for us all, so we need you. So here we are with these converging crises, and I won't go through them all. We just mentioned some of them, and here we are in the middle. And and these all double down on each other. So the sum is more than the addition of its parts. And you look at the two establishment parties, they are both responsible for these crises. And on just about every one of these, Barack Obama has embraced the policies of George Bush and gone far beyond. So it's very important that we stand up, not only for the right thing on the issues, but that we be willing to stand up politically and to stand up to the fear campaigns that say you have to settle for the lesser evil, because we've been practicing this politics of fear at least since the Nader-Bush-Gore campaign. And there's a track record to this politics of fear that tells you you have to be quiet politically, do what you want on the issues, but don't stand up politically. And what we've seen, basically, is that the politics of fear has actually delivered everything we were afraid of, from the expanding wars to the meltdown of the climate, the Wall Street bailouts, the offshoring of our jobs. You know, every one of them, the Democratic Party has delivered every bit as much, if not more, than the Republican Party. At least under a Republican, you have a vibrant protest movement, whereas under a Democrat, everything shuts down. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's really we the people who are the driver of change. And being heard loud and clear in political discourse is a key part of that change. And, you know, that's how I see our role as independent, non-corporate political parties. We provide a voice in the political arena for the social movements that are doing the hard work out in the streets. And it's the two of us together, the social movements together with political, independent, third parties. Together we make history, and we are an unstoppable force for change. So I'm going to focus then on just these two crises, the economic crisis and the climate crisis, to make the point, you know, that the clock is ticking. We got to do it now. There is no time to lose here. So this is just some of the highlights of that economic crisis, you know, with 1 out of every 2 Americans now in poverty or low income, heading for poverty according to the Census Bureau, some 36 or 37 million students who are effectively indentured servants with their student debt, and the job situation, not only with high unemployment, especially among students and recent graduates, but with the Labor Department predicting that 9 out of every 10 jobs that are being created over the next decade do not require a college degree and therefore will not be paying college wages. Half of those jobs that are being created don't even require a high school degree. So we are definitely, you know, this isn't just a moment we're going through. This is what the economy of the future looks like by design. And by design, there is no way out. There is no exit strategy. So this is actually a great time to be organizing for really fundamental systemic change. I just came back from Norway, where I was working with the Norway Green Party that is part of an effort to rein in their national oil company. They actually have a national oil company, which is a good start, except that it's one of the major drivers now for Canadian tar sands, for deep sea drilling, and for Arctic exploration. So it's doing all the wrong things because of the oil, but also because Norway has a very good economy with very large social investments. Things are really good in Norway, and it's very hard to organize for deep change when things are really good. And it made me so aware of the profound sea change that's happened here in the last 5 years. Are people, you know, as astonished by this, you know, as I am, that it is so much easier to organize for real change right now than it was even a few years ago? Are others finding that as well? You're not sort of the lone voice in the wilderness anymore? We've been ahead of the curve, and the curve has caught up to us just about all over the world. Norway, I'd say, is probably the only place in the world where it hasn't yet caught up, but it will. So at any rate, the economic situation makes it very easy right now to make our case. And this is sort of one statistic that I find, you know, just so summarizes it. if you had 100 people in the room right now, and that represented, say, the whole U.S. economy, 100 people, and there were 100 loaves of bread, and that represented all of our cumulative wealth. One person who's the most overnourished to start with has 50 loaves of bread. 50 people who are incredibly undernourished have 1 loaf of bread. That is the U.S. economy right now, and it's not like it's getting better. It's actually quickly getting worse. So this is a very unstable situation. The economy is on our side right now, and as we'll go through in a moment, the climate is very much on our side. So we have public relations agents working with us right now that you couldn't hire, with $1 trillion budget. There's all kinds of shock and awe in the economy and in the climate, which is just there to make the case that this can't go on and that we need really deep systemic change right now. I want to comment real quick on the unemployment numbers, because you keep hearing about how it's stabilized or it's getting a little bit better. Not so last month. Last month, even their sort of misrepresentative statistics looked pretty good prior to last month. Last month, it was terrible. But if you look at the so-called EPOP, what does it stand for? It's the fraction of the population, that's what it is. It's the employed percent of population. This is like the reliable unemployment statistic to look at, the EPOP. That EPOP actually says that our unemployment is only 7% better than it was at the worst crisis. So, and basically Congress is doing nothing about it. I won't take the time to go into that now. The latest assault being this Obama budget. I won't go through the fiscal cliff and sequestration, which are essentially engineered. It's an engineered crisis. This whole debt and fiscal cliff crisis is an engineered crisis, completely avoidable, completely fixable, and it's also not a crisis. It's not a crisis. The real crisis is unemployment. And all of this is made worse by the solutions that are being promoted by Washington and the 2 political parties, including the Obama budget, which is sort of the latest assault, which would substitute for the sequester a bunch of really cruel and terrible cuts. The Obama budget instead would cut Medicare and Social Security instead of the sequester. Which is terrible, and exactly what he said he would not do. He ran on a program of making the economy more fair and protecting Social Security in particular, which is what he does not do. He would create the change CPI, which is essentially a cut to a program which is marginal already. The American public is calling for increasing Social Security benefits, not decreasing them, by a 4-to-1 margin. And it would also make Medicare a means-tested benefit, which is how you what you do with a program when you want to undermine public support. So these are all the wrong things. They should not be accepted, and the public does not support them. So quickly on to the climate crisis, which makes the as we say, the climate cliff makes the economic cliff look like a small bump in the road. So, the numbers are staggering. 1,000 children a day are already dying from the impact of climate. This is according to a recent UN report. The costs already are phenomenal. And in the past decade, was the hottest decade on record. You really began to see American public opinion change in the last 3 years since we've been having these incredible storms. And it's not only the storms, it's also their economic impact. And in 2011, we broke all records with 14 storms or other severe economic impact, severe weather events, 14 of them that cost at least $1 billion. And then in 2012, it wasn't quite as many. But we've had these record-breaking events all in recent years. We now have established drought, which is basically here for the long haul in the southern and the southwestern U.S. And this is also having devastating effects. And to think on top of that now they're trying to establish fracking, which will decimate our water supplies further, makes it an absolute non-starter. And all the more important that we stop fracking and stop it here in New York State to start with. What's really striking about the climate stuff is that this has been going on for like 150 years at least. The output of carbon and the rising levels of CO2 and greenhouse gases. But 80% of the rise in temperature has occurred simply in the last 30 years. 80% has occurred just recently, which tells you, in no uncertain terms, that this thing is dramatically accelerating. If you couldn't see that with your own eyes, this is really accelerating, which says to us this is the time that we really have to stand up and stand together and demand the changes that everyday people want to see if we're going to stop this thing. We got to do it quick. One other thing I want to point out, a couple things about climate change, just because it will help you be armed to have this discussion about why this is an urgent and immediate problem. We saw heat waves in the EU, which knocked off 30, 40, 50,000 people in the course of a week. This was in the early 2000s. That was with sustained temperatures of 105 degrees for a week. But what happens as you have temperature rise is that what you get with a heat wave will no longer be 105 degrees, it'll be 120 degrees. And that may be as soon as mid-century. Anybody plan to be around mid-century? I think a few of us. Certainly our kids or nieces and nephews or neighbors, whatever. So, they can no longer pretend that this is something for future generations to worry about. This is us, and it's happening right now. Let's see, just really quickly. These are just some of the predictions about how quickly the temperature is rising. And there are very respectable scientists, including the Hadley Center, which is sort of like the Jim Hansons of the United Kingdom, who are saying we'll be at 4 degrees centigrade warming by mid-century at the rate we're going. And remember, so far we have less than 1 degree centigrade warming. So that means quadruple, at least the impacts, plus then you get to all these tipping points. So we don't want to go there. Here we are with the Arctic. This was in 1979, half gone in 2007, maybe all gone as soon as the next 10 years during summers. And this is not only devastating, obviously, to the ecosystem, but this is a very big deal. This is one of those tipping points because as you go from a surface that looks like that, how do I get that? Okay. That kind of surface here, which is reflective, it sends the heat back into outer space to a blue surface. Whoa, here we are, which is absorbing heat. So this is part of what's contributing to the acceleration of warming. So there are many of these tipping points that we are hitting right now. So we really got to stop. We got to stop on a dime. This is Greenland, and these are some of what are now being observed on the surface of Greenland. These are sort of like internal waterfalls where water warms and then it bores its way through the ice and it becomes like a waterfall to drain the melting water. And these are seen now all over the surface of Greenland. And the issue here is that this is melting like way faster than we ever would have predicted. It's accelerated like 5-fold just in the last decade, 10 to 15 years that the scientists have observed it. That is, it's increased 500%. So, all bets are off about the rate at which something like Greenland could break up. 5 years ago, the conventional wisdom was, don't think about, these ice sheets breaking up. There's no way that will happen for a millennium. Now they're saying, well, on second thought, we don't know. So just to put this on the back burner, if the ice sheets were to break up, what would you get? And this, by the way, is from Scientific American. This is not sort of, fringe science here. Greenland holds 24 feet of sea level. And even Hansen is now saying we could see Greenland break up over the course of a couple of years. Not meaning in a couple of years, but at some indefinite time in the future, Greenland could start to crack up. And we're learning now more about the science of these ice sheets and how they work, but we don't know enough to say when this could happen, but it could essentially fall apart, and you could see sea level come up by 24 feet in a couple of years' time. And same for the West Antarctic, and then the East Antarctic, the South Pole, which is the largest, is 170 feet. So, you're talking over, this is not what civilization as we know it looks like. About half of all human beings live not far from the coastline. In the U.S., it's about 5 million people that live within 4 feet of sea level elevation. So, this is absolute pandemonium to think about. This is just what Boston looks like. If we were to see something like a Greenland breakup, it very quickly fills in. And this is just looking here at carbon dioxide cycles, which it's been cycling forever. So this just means the level's going up of CO2, levels come down. And this axis here, let's see if this thing will work. Yes, no, yes, okay. So this is thousands of years. So this goes back about, 500,000 years here. It's been going up and down until just now, when suddenly, whoop, it went like that. So you can see what a very unnatural thing is going on here scientifically. This just makes the point that the political establishment is not only doing nothing, they're actually making it much, much worse very quickly, from fracking to offshore oil. The policy is not just all of the above, but it's an expedited all of the above. It's hurry up and build as much pipeline and do as much fracking as you possibly can. This is just, an outrageous disaster. And, the president is bragging, he's built more pipeline, enough to go around the planet. And he's just cutting red tape to speed it up as fast as he can. And of course he cares about the climate, so he's also creating some green energy. But it's really important to understand the climate does not care about renewable energy. We do, but the climate doesn't. The climate only reads carbon dioxide. So it's like saying, I'm going to give my kid an all-of-the-above diet. It will include some lead and some pesticides and some arsenic. But I'll also give them, blueberries and spinach. Won't do. All right. So tar sands must be stopped. Obama has really already approved it by approving the southern half of the pipeline. It's already being built. So there's very little question that he's going to give it the thumbs up. So it's really important that we stop it and make it clear that it is going to stop. I won't say more about it. But when 50,000 people, went to Washington to tell Obama to stand up to, big fossil fuels, what was he doing? He was golfing with, big fossil fuels, and with this guy here too. At that resort, which this guy owns because he's, swimming in dough from his oil investments. That's where he went, and that's how much the faith of the climate community was, restored, for having trusted Obama. So real quickly, we can fix this, and furthermore, the American public actually wants to fix it. They don't do polls on this stuff because it's very dangerous to do that. But in fact, a 2009 poll, which was the last time that we could find that the question was asked, people actually supported a government-created program of jobs. Like 68% felt that everyone who wanted to work should have a job, and it's the responsibility of the federal government to see to it that that happens. So we are calling for not only a New Deal to put everyone who wants to back to work at a good paying living wage job, but to call for, in fact, a Green New Deal, which is also an emergency transition into a green and sustainable economy. It would jumpstart the green economy, put a halt to climate change, and, by the way, make wars for oil obsolete, which would free up most of that $1 trillion which is spent every year on the military-industrial security complex. And along with that, we call for an economic bill of rights, including Medicare for all. And how about we bail out the students and not the bankers? The bankers are the ones who caused this mess. We should do like Iceland did, let the banks fail and send the bankers to jail. Oh, yeah. And while we're at it, public higher education should be free. Absolutely. We know from the GI Bill that for every dollar invested in public higher education, $7 is returned in economic benefits, including more than enough to pay for the tuition. So this is not only the right thing to do, it's the economical thing to do. We need a moratorium on foreclosures to lower the principal, renegotiate the mortgages, and keep families in their homes. And also with the Green New Deal, we call for financial reforms, including breaking up the banks, nationalizing the Federal Reserve so that credit and so on is available in the public interest to those who need it, and a few other things, including taxing Wall Street. It's the only sector of the economy which is not taxed. People generally pay 9% sales tax. Wall Street pays none. If Wall Street was paying even 0.5%, that's not to say it should be limited to that, but if Wall Street was only paying 0.5%, that would be hundreds of billions, perhaps more, back into the economy every year, which is more than enough to pay for the Green New Deal. And let's see, I won't go into the democracy reforms right now. The cost, by the way, of a Green New Deal is small, of putting everyone back to work. It's less than $500 billion to create 24 million jobs. So this is entirely affordable. That's, the Wall Street tax alone can almost pay for that. And when you add to that downsizing the military and ending the Wall Street bailouts, this is really a piece of cake. And then other key priorities are some kind of carbon fee and dividend, which should be progressive, as well as democratizing and socializing not just the oil sector, but really the entire energy sector. That was really more about Norway. And the last point is just that, it really is about the politics of courage, not the politics of fear. This is how change has always happened. When a social movement out in the street works together with an independent political party, they really leverage each other and create an unstoppable force for change. Like the Liberty Party at the time of the abolition movement, the Liberty Party actually advanced that agenda. The agenda of the likes of Frederick Douglass, one of the leading abolitionists, of course, and helped make that a national issue. It got picked up from the Liberty Party by another small, independent, progressive party at the time called the Republican Party, which happened to win the election and drive that abolition agenda forward. The Women's Party, which again fought in the streets, went to jail, went on hunger strikes, and formed an independent political party, the Women's Party, that actually created the political threat. Without a political threat, you really don't get traction. So when they tell you, you're a spoiler and, create the fear campaign and all that, this is exactly what they're afraid of. So, you don't want to play into their game plan. It's very important to stand up, because it's only by standing up that we can actually drive this agenda forward. And likewise with all the advances of the labor movement. You know, it was not only the social movement in the street, it was the independent parties, the socialist, labor, communist, and progressive parties that actually created that electoral threat and were able to move that agenda forward. As Frederick Douglass says, and it still applies today, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And that really is the role of independent political parties, is to help articulate the vision, the agenda, and the actual demands of that movement in the street. And as Alice Walker says, one of the biggest ways that we give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We actually do have it, and this is how we build it. So together we can actually turn this breaking point that we face into the tipping point that we need to take back our democracy and the future we deserve. And this is a great conference for us to begin planning, you know, what does this look like? How do we build this movement? So thank you all for being here.